Nestled in Virginia, the Colonial Parkway stands as the historic road which seamlessly links Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. Spanning 22 miles under the watchful care of the National Park Service, it offers a captivating journey through the Virginia Peninsula. While the parkway unveils its scenic charm by day, by night it transforms into an eerie and impenetrable expanse, as parts of the highway are completely dark due to the absence of businesses or streetlights. Certain quiet sections of the roadway have become a favorite spot for young couples to park and share each other's company without the watchful eyes of the general public. Beyond its historical allure, the parkway carries a somber legacy, tied to a series of unsolved murders which transpired from October of 1986 to September of 1989. Along this compact and scenic route, at least 3 couples were murdered, and 1 couple remains missing. For 3 decades, the veil of mystery persisted until January of 2024 marked a turning point in the Colonial Parkway Murders. On the afternoon of October 12, 1986, a jogger discovered a suspicious vehicle near Cheetah Mannix along the Colonial Parkway, approximately 6 miles outside of Williamsburg. The white 1980 Honda Civic was found pushed into dense vegetation overlooking the York River. The jogger immediately notified police. The National Park Service Rangers arrived to investigate what they believed to be a car accident. They smashed out the back window of the Honda Civic in order to reach the 2 supposed accident victims inside. The 2 victims were later identified as 21-year-old Rebecca Dowski, who had been in the back seat, and 27-year-old Kathy Thomas, who was stuffed into the car's hatchback. Kathleen Thomas was a U.S. Naval Academy graduate. After graduation from the academy, she served 5 years of active duty in Norfolk, Virginia. However, in 1986, she left the Navy due to the limited career prospects for women at the time. Transitioning to a successful career as a stockbroker in Virginia Beach, Kathy pursued a business administration master's degree and seemed to excel at everything she attempted. The other victim, Rebecca Dowski, an accomplished athlete and business management major at the College of William and Mary, had formed a romantic relationship with Kathy in early 1986. The women were last seen on the evening of October 9, 1986, at a computer lab on the William and Mary campus. According to her friends, Rebecca had planned a weekend trip to her family home in New York. While on her way, she planned to meet up with her old friends. However, those close to her also recall she had only lightly packed her car and had made no firm plans. The following day, on October 10th, Kathy didn't show up for her work, and over the next few days, both women remained missing. Despite their absence, no one suspected foul play, and no missing person report was filed until their bodies were found on October 12, 1986. Both women were found fully clothed, showing no signs of sexual assault. The autopsy revealed that the women had been bound with a rope and strangled. The killer had then slit their throats so deeply that the medical examiner said they were nearly decapitated. A clump of hair was found in Kathy's hand, suggesting that they had fought their attacker. The killer had doused the body and the vehicle with diesel fuel, indicating he had tried to burn the car and the bodies inside of it, but had failed. Investigators say that the killer's choice to use diesel fuel showed he did not know much about setting fires, as diesel fuel was not the appropriate ignition source for such an endeavor. Diesel has a higher flash point than normal gasoline, meaning that diesel needs to heat up before it can be ignited. If someone were to toss a lit match into a puddle of diesel fuel, the flame would simply go out. Crime scene technicians found several burned-up matches and cigarettes nearby. Following the unsuccessful attempt to set the vehicle ablaze, it is presumed that the killer either drove or pushed it off the embankment into the runoff area, hoping that it would roll into the river below. However, in yet another example of the killer's gross miscalculations and lack of foresight, the car instead got stuck in the heavy bramble. Detectives noted that there was not much blood found at the crime scene, even though both women's heads had nearly been decapitated. The absence of blood suggested that the murders had been committed elsewhere and that the bodies had been dumped in the car. Investigators ruled out robbery as a motive, as both women's purses were still present and no money or jewelry had been taken. A forensic criminologist later said, quote, "Becky's wound isn't as deep as Kathy's wound. They're very, very different in force and intensity." This expert went on to theorize that 21-year-old Becky was collateral damage and that the real target had been 27-year-old Kathy. Because Kathy seemed to be the focus of the attack, authorities first suspected her ex-girlfriend may have been involved. However, it was later discovered that Kathy and Rebecca had actually met through her ex and that the relationship seemed to be amicable. Rebecca and Kathy's ex had become friends through a computer class at the College of William and Mary, and she had introduced Rebecca to Kathy as a potential love interest, even expressing good wishes to the happy couple. Eventually, the ex-girlfriend was ruled out as a suspect. Kathy and Rebecca's case was eventually investigated by the FBI because it took place on federal land. Over 150 fingerprints were found inside the car, but none matched any known individuals. The case would eventually go cold. Law enforcement believed this to be an isolated incident, perhaps a love triangle gone wrong or a personal vendetta enacted. The possibility that this area had a serial killer in its midst was not realized until 10 months later. On September 23, 1987, 2 more bodies were found, this time on Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge on the south shore of James River near Smithfield, Virginia. The 2 bodies were identified as David Knobling and Robin Edwards. David Knobling was a 20-year-old from Hampton, Virginia, who had had a tumultuous childhood but appeared to have turned his life around after attending military school. At the time of his death, he had been employed as a water purification system salesman, and he had a baby on the way with his longtime on-again, off-again girlfriend. Robin Edwards was a 14-year-old 8th grade student at Huntington Middle School. The young girl had a history of running away and had been diagnosed with depression, but recently she had shown signs of improvement and had expressed more interest in school, even wanting to learn a foreign language, French. On September 19, 1987, David and Robin's paths crossed when they met for the first time during a movie outing. David was taking his cousins, Jason and his younger brother Michael, to a movie as their mother had a migraine. Robin had been accompanying them, invited as Jason's date. However, the movie was sold out, so the group decided to go to an arcade instead. After hanging out at the arcade for a few hours, the 4 began their drive home, with Jason and Michael riding in the back of David's pickup truck and Robin riding alone in the cab of the truck with David. David dropped off Robin at her home around 11 p.m. Unbeknownst to Jason or Michael, it seemed that David, an adult at age 20, and Robin, a mere child, had made clandestine plans to meet up again later that night. Robin was last seen by her mother at 11:30 p.m. Sometime after that, Robin snuck out to meet with David. David was seen by his mother just after midnight. It is believed David picked up Robin after leaving his house sometime after 12 a.m. The following morning, Robin's father found the front door open. He then discovered his daughter was missing from her bedroom. As Robin had a history of running away, he thought she would return soon. However, she never did. Robin's mother officially reported her missing on September 21st. The same day Robin was reported missing, September 21st, a black Ford Ranger pickup truck was found abandoned in the Ragged Island Wildlife Refuge parking lot, 20 miles from the parkway. A patrol officer was the one to discover the vehicle. However, initially, he thought nothing of it, as that area had been a popular lover's lane for young people. The truck was found with both doors open, keys still in the ignition, and turned to accessory mode, with the radio playing and the windshield wipers swaying back and forth. Inside the truck, the officers found 2 pairs of shoes and several pieces of clothing, including men and women's underwear. The positioning of the vehicle seemed to indicate that the 2 had pulled over to speak with someone, with the driver's side window partially rolled down. This crime scene detail later caused investigators to speculate that the person the 2 had been talking with may have been posing as a police officer. A man's wallet was found still inside the pickup, which ruled robbery out as a probable motive. The abandoned truck was soon found to be registered to David Knobling, and his family was immediately notified and questioned. David's mother told police that she believed the scene was staged. She noted that the keys were in the ignition turned to accessory mode, a common practice to use accessories like radio without running the engine. However, this seemed perplexing as David had hardwired the radio to operate directly from the truck's battery, eliminating the need to turn on the engine to use it. She believed someone else who did not know about such a feature had left the car on after using it for nefarious intent. A search for David was carried out in the area where his truck was found. All the while, no connection was made as to the fact that 13-year-old Robin was also missing. 2 days later, on September 23rd, a jogger found a pile of clothes along the James River. Upon further inspection, he realized it was not a pile of clothes, but the body of a young girl. He immediately notified police. A search of the area would lead to another grim discovery, this time the body of a man who was later identified as David Knobling by his father. The young girl's body was later identified by her parents as Robin Edwards. Robin's body was found lying face down, wearing a blouse and pants. Her pants were unbuttoned and her blouse was around her neck. David's body was found tangled in tree roots and wearing only pants. Both had been shot to death. Robin had been shot once in the back of the head, execution style. David had been shot twice, once in the head and once in the shoulder, which the medical examiner said showed he may have been running from the killer. There was evidence that Robin had been sexually assaulted prior to her murder. The investigation into the double homicide was made more complicated due to the changing river conditions and the weather. Investigation notes show that it had rained the previous day, and as a result, any footprints or evidence was subsequently washed away. Authorities were unable to determine if the 2 had been killed where their bodies were found or if they had been killed somewhere else. Detectives speculated that while inside of David's truck, the 2 had been approached by the armed killer, who had coerced them out of the truck and possibly into a state of undress. They then theorized the 2 were forced to walk approximately 1 mile towards the river. There, it is believed that Robin was shot first, which prompted David to attempt to escape, resulting in a gunshot to his shoulder. Subsequently, David was also shot in the back of the head. It is thought by law enforcement that the bodies were then possibly dragged several hundred feet to the river water's edge. The bodies then laid in the moist environment for 3 days before they were found in a state of decomposition, which made the investigation all the more complex. Despite questioning multiple suspects over the years, none were ever charged, and just as in the double homicide 10 months before, the case would go cold. Despite the murders happening 20 miles away from the Colonial Parkway, the investigators linked the 2 cases because both pairs of victims were couples that were slain in or near Lover's Lane areas, and the 2 locations were only a 30-minute drive apart. Less than a year later, another young couple went missing. On April 9, 1988, 2 students, a 20-year-old named Richard Keith Call, known as Keith to his friends, and 18-year-old Cassandra Lee Haley, also known as Sandra, went out on a date. Keith had recently broken up with his girlfriend and was looking forward to getting back into the dating world. This would be his and Sandra's first night out together. That evening, Keith picked up Sandra from her home and headed to the movies. However, on their way, they changed their minds and attended a party instead. Observers noted that Keith and Sandra didn't seem romantically connected at the party. Both spent their time talking to other people. It is unclear when the couple left the party, but as Sandra had a curfew of 2 a.m., it is believed they left sometime around 1:30 a.m. Neither of them returned to their homes that night. Sandra's family reported her missing after she failed to return home the following morning. The same morning Sandra was reported missing, on the 10th of April at around 7:15 a.m., Keith's father, Richard Call, was driving to work when he noticed his son's red 1982 Toyota Cecilia parked alongside the Colonial Parkway. Curious, he pulled over and inspected the car. Inside, he saw Keith's wristwatch and Sandra's purse, along with a couple of empty beer cans. Initially, he didn't think much of the scene, assuming the couple had paused to appreciate the surroundings or to take a stroll. Pressed for time, Keith's father continued his way to work. 2 hours later, at 9 a.m., a park ranger found the same car abandoned on the road with its side door ajar, which raised concerns. Signs of disturbance included an open glove box and scattered belongings inside. The items found included men's shoes, which were later identified as Keith's, Sandra's purse, Keith's watch, glasses, car keys, Keith's wallet, and an additional wallet with $12 in it. Also located and taken into evidence was a Busch beer can. In the backseat of the car, they found almost all of Keith's clothes, including his underwear. They also found some of Sandra's clothes, which included her undergarments. The police confirmed that these were the clothes that they had been wearing when they disappeared. Even though Sandra's purse was found with its checkbook still inside, her wallet, money, and jewelry were missing. Strangely, Richard Call, Keith's father, told investigators that only a few items were inside the car when he had first seen it earlier that morning. Strangely, Richard Call, Keith's father, told investigators that only a few items had been present in the car when he had seen it earlier that morning, suggesting the person responsible for the disappearance of the two had added the items sometime between 7:15 a.m. and 9 a.m. Investigators also found that the driver's seat had been moved forward, and as Keith was 5'10", it is believed that someone else had driven the car. They also noticed mud on the car's tires, suggesting it had been driven in wet conditions elsewhere. As the car was found on the Colonial Parkway, the FBI investigated the case. A massive search for Keith and Sandra was launched, with police dogs tracing their scent to the York River shoreline. Initially, authorities considered the possibility of the two going swimming and subsequently drowning. However, despite an extensive search of the river, their bodies could not be found. The two have never been located, and foul play is suspected in their disappearance. Then, during Labor Day weekend in 1989, 21-year-old Daniel Laurer visited his brother, Clinton, along with Clinton's fiancée, 18-year-old Anna Marie Phelps, in Virginia Beach. Clinton and Anna invited Daniel to come and live with them. Seeking to change his life, Daniel accepted the offer. It was decided that he would move the following week. On September 4th, Daniel left Virginia Beach to get his clothing and other items for the move from his family's home in Amelia County. As Anna's parents also lived in Amelia County, she decided to accompany him to visit her family. Later that evening, Daniel gathered his things and left his family home in his gold 1972 Chevy Nova. He picked up Anna on the way around 11:15 p.m., and the two headed for Virginia Beach. They should have arrived in Virginia Beach within a couple of hours. However, they never came home. When they did not arrive by 2:30 a.m., Clinton decided to go look for them. He figured their car may have broken down somewhere along I-64 and that they may have needed help. Unfortunately, Clinton had to turn back due to running low on gas and low on money after having covered a considerable distance on the highway. Unbeknownst to his brother, Daniel's vehicle was parked just a bit ahead on the interstate, mere miles away from his last search location. On September 5th, Daniel's Chevy Nova was discovered abandoned at the I-65 New Kent rest stop, facing the opposite direction of their intended route. The car was oddly parked near a no parking sign and on the acceleration ramp, half on the road, half next to the exit. The car was found with both doors unlocked, keys in the ignition, and the driver's window rolled partly down. Anna's much-beloved roach clip with a feather had been hanging from the rearview mirror. Despite the vehicle being in good condition, with a nearly full tank of gas, it appeared as if it had been driven in wooded areas, accumulating dirt, grass stains, and weeds in the undercarriage. As the car was found facing the opposite direction of the pair's intended route, many suspect someone other than Daniel may have driven and abandoned the vehicle at the rest stop. Just like the other 3 cases, all of their belongings were found inside of the car, except for Anna's wallet with her ID and money, as well as an electric blanket. A massive search led by the Virginia State Police utilized tracking dogs and helicopters, but no trace of Daniel nor Anna was ever found. On October 19, 1989, 6 weeks after their car was found, hunters found the skeletonized bodies of Anna Maria and Daniel. They were in the woods off of Interstate 64, somewhere between Williamsburg and Richmond, about 1 mile away from where Daniel's car had been found. Their bodies were covered with the electric blanket from Daniel's car, and they were so badly decomposed it was impossible to determine a cause of death. Even though the cause of death could not be ascertained, there were what appeared to be stab marks on Anna Maria's bones, suggesting that she had been stabbed to death. The sole physical evidence near the bodies was a locket worn by Anna Maria containing pictures of her nephews, discovered 50 to 100 feet away without its chain. Just like in the other cases, police followed the leads, but it would eventually go cold. Authorities do not believe that this case is actually related to the other 3, simply because the crime occurred about an hour's drive from the parkway. Despite this, many in the community do believe the cases are related, as the similarities between the crime scenes are striking. All of the victims were murdered in close proximity to their vehicle, with the initial 3 discovered in well-known Lovers Lane areas. In all cases, robbery was not a motive, and assault did not appear to be a factor in any of the incidents. The first and third homicides occurred within a short distance, while the second and fourth took place approximately half an hour away from the parkway. All the murders happened on a holiday or weekend and near bodies of water. Some skeptics dispute the idea of a single serial killer, suggesting the involvement of at least 2 or more distinct perpetrators. The variations in the methods of killing are frequently cited, as Kathy and Rebecca were strangled to death and had their throats slit, while David and Robin were shot, and Anna Maria and Daniel were presumed to be stabbed. Despite theories that the crimes may not be connected, many still believe that the Colonial Parkway murders were the work of a serial killer. Over the years, police have questioned over 150 suspects in connection to these 4 cases, but all have been cleared. The cases would remain unsolved until January 9th, 2024, when authorities identified Alan Way Wilmer Sr. as a suspect in the murder of David Knobling and Robin Edwards, as well as in the murder of Teresa Lynn Spa Howell. Police said that DNA evidence confirmed that Wilmer was responsible for 3 of the murders. Teresa Lynn Spa Howell had been last seen leaving the Zodiac Club, a then popular night spot on East Mercury Boulevard, at 2:30 a.m. on July 1st, 1989. A construction worker found her body 7 hours later in a wooded area in the 500 block of Butler Farm Road. She was identified 3 days later after a missing persons report was filed. She had been sexually assaulted and had died of strangulation. In May of 1995, the Hampton police charged a different man in Howell's murder and were considering him for a capital murder charge. The 32-year-old man spent about 4 months in custody before being cleared on DNA evidence. The case then remained unsolved for the next 28 years, until January of 2024. The suspect, Wilmer, was described as a sandy-haired, blue-eyed, muscular man, about 5 feet 5 inches tall and 165 pounds. He had a commercial fishing boat named the Denny Wade, and during the 1980s made his living as a fisherman, farming clams and oysters. He drove several pickup trucks, including a distinct blue 1966 Dodge Fargo with a Virginia license plate that read EMRAW. State police also say he owned a business called Better Tree Service and was an avid hunter. Wilmer had no criminal record. As such, his DNA was never entered into any law enforcement databases. Wilmer died alone in his Northern Neck home in 2017. Nobody found him for weeks. A delivery driver finally spotted an open door to Wilmer's home on December 15, 2017, and walked in the entrance, only to see the dead body and call police. The 63-year-old suspect had died of a hardening of his arteries. Once his DNA was entered into the databases, it matched one of the Colonial Parkway murders, David Knobling and Robin Edwards. Prior to this match, in 2021, investigators had linked the murder of David and Robin to another murder, that of a woman named Teresa Lynn Spa Howell from Hampton. Both crimes had been committed by the same individual. However, investigators did not know the name of the killer at the time, only that his DNA was a link. Although Alan Wilmer Sr. is believed to have been responsible for the deaths of David Knobling and Robin Edwards, he has not been named in connection with the other Colonial Parkway murders. Investigators are actively pursuing leads on the other killings and have not yet ruled anything out, including Wilmer's potential involvement. Detectives are still working to reconstruct his movements and his encounters with others during his lifetime. Agents are encouraging anyone who may have worked with Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. or who may have hung out with him or had any information about his life to contact the FBI by calling 1-800-CALL-FBI. That's 1-800-CALL-FBI. If you like what we do and want to see more, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much to our patrons. If you would like to support this channel, you can visit the link in our bio below.